This video is sponsored by Incogni. Amidst the stars, a clandestine sect of the Tau Empire embraces the taint of chaos. Swathed in obsidian armor, scarred with chaotic icons, forsaking order for ruthless, unpredictable warfare, their hunger for domination evidenced by the severed heads of fallen foes, grim trophies of conquest. Yet buried deep flickers a yearning for redemption and the greater good they once served. Will they find salvation or succumb to eternal damnation? In the 41st millennium's grim darkness, their fate hangs in the balance, an enigma of twisted devotion and the haunting echoes of a corrupted path. Hi there, my name's Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and in this video I'm going to paint up something nice, non-controversial. Chaos Tau! Now, if you're familiar with the background of Warhammer 40k, you'll probably be aware that the Tau, one of the setting's main alien factions, a multi-species, technologically advanced stellar empire, are kind of immune to the psychic lure of the Chaos Gods. For the same reason they don't really have psykers in the tabletop game, they're all about advanced tech, fancy tactics, and massive firepower, so no need for mind bullets or psychic shields and stuff like that. But lore-wise, I don't think there's any real reason they couldn't align themselves with Chaos Undivided, especially when choosing an ally to fight their main foe, us humans. Specifically, the Imperium of Man. And to be honest, the whole no Chaos Tau thing seems like it's going to get retconned by Games Workshop any second anyway, given the recent novels about Commander Farsight and his sword that's a literal chaos demon keeping him alive. Also, Chicken on the Midwinter Minis Discord server pointed out that the original Tau concept art has a really grimdark, macabre feel to it anyway. Long story short, I've got a Tau Start Collecting box to paint up for my Start Collecting Deathmatch tournament, where they'll fight the Skitarii in the last game of the opening rounds. And I just want a quick little army scheme that's fun to build, quick to paint, and looks unique. Sue me. So let me show you what I'm thinking. I've built the bodies of the Fire Warriors as breachers. Obviously the short-range weapons are going to do nasty things in the close quarters of the arena. I'll left the heads off for now, and also the shields too, and I'll show you why in a minute. For the bases, I decided to make my own texture paint by chucking random stuff into my spice grinder. Paper, some Necron guns, crushed glass, sawdust and cat litter and some sticks, and naturally a tea bag. God save the king. Here we go, baby. Ugh, remember to wear a mask if you're gonna do stupid stuff like this. Now this is all blitzed up, I just added some black craft paint to it, mixed it up and slopped it on the bases. To show these aren't your average sophisticated noble Tau soldiers, let's put some mangled corpses on their bases. I bought these from Puppets War, they're resin and really actually way more detailed than I thought they would be. Gross. I added some super glue to the underside of them and slapped them down. The support missile drone from the Fire Warriors got pressed down into the DIY texture paint while it was still wet, so it would sit realistically on the ground, and then I glued everything down with super glue when the paste was dry. Now let's customize the leader of the Fire Warriors, the Chassui. I'm going to use this cool dramatic kneeling pose for it, and use a couple of accessory arms to make him nasty. I gouged away the random stuff in his hands and then sliced up a Dark Eldar weapon to make it a bit less Dark Eldar-y, and stuck them all on. On the other arm, I used one of these classic decapitated head bits from my bits box, but I can never remember what kit these come from. Let me know in the comments, please. Also, while you're there, be a champ and smash that like button. Now, some of the edges look a little bit sparse on coverage, so I'll use an actual pre-made texture paint to cover the gaps. I know, what a sellout, huh? Using actual products instead of DIYing everything. Now, the Farseer is also going to get customized. First, the head. I dehumaned this trophy head from the Age of Sigmar Putrid Blight King box, I think. Goodbye ears, goodbye nose, and then I cut that weird Tau nose groove thing in the middle of his face. Yeah, the stuff of nightmares. Love it. Now for a little Blackstone Fortress throwback. Remember those funky Megamind looking Chaos Psykers? The Chaos icons they're holding would be a really nice swap out. And this other Chaos Psyker's wacky stick will go nicely as a little banner on the back of the Fire Warrior boss dude too. Now, to gross up the rest of the infantry and to add some fun narrative element to this macabre little warband, I'll attach some severed heads and skulls to their left hips. Some from my bits box, and some snipped off those Puppets War corpses I used on the bases. Did you think the Crisis suits were going to escape the conversion? Think again. I grabbed some of the big demonic mega horny skulls from the Citadel skull set and glued them to the tops of the Crisis suit heads, and also covered their right shoulders with the skull too, instead of a shield. Now, for the heads, I thought it would be pretty cool to play up to the Tau's digitigrade stance. That's the name for things that walk on their toes and not on their feet, and get some kind of goat-like or beastie-themed helmets. These Puppets War ones are, well, I feel like they're a little bit too big, too wide at least. I think they're made to suit Space Marine proportions, and these dudes are tiny by comparison. So I'm going to think about that and mull it over while I carry on with the conversion. Now, this is where things get a little bit hazardous, maybe? I thought it'd be kind of cool to try to melt some chaotic emblems into their armor using a basic pyrography kit. You can grab these super cheap on Amazon, so I thought I'd give it a go. I'll leave a link to this one in the description in case you feel inspired. Now, I had a tough time getting a nib that was both sharp enough to cut good detail and ones that were too fine to retain the heat and not melt the plastic at all. But how cool does this heat burn look on this blade? Take a screenshot and use this as a reference when you're painting hot weapons. I ended up filing one of the more robust tips to a slightly finer point and then just going with it. I don't think this tool has a tight enough point to work on the shields though. I mean, it's not as refined as I'd like, but hey, let's just go for it. We'll make it work in the painting phase. Oh, sorry, not this video, mate. For a final touch of the over-the-top grimdark Chaos Goth vibes, the Crisis suits got some fine jewellery chain wrapped and glued around random thighs and arms. Okay, that was quite a bit of customization, but I think I'm about ready to paint. But Guy, what about the heads and the shields? Well, at last week's game night, my pal Steve heard how much I was struggling to cut fine chaos patterns into the Fire Warrior shields and get chaotic heads that looked the right size, and he said, leave it with me. But what did he mean by that? We'll find out in a second, but first let's chat about Incogni, the sponsor of this video. I think a lot of people have just accepted that junk mail and cold calls and shadowy data collection online are just facts of modern life. You can follow the small print and do lots of research and find these marketing companies yourself and manually ask for your data to be deleted. Well, you're within your right to do that, but it takes so much time, and that's by design. They want you to give up and just accept your fate. Now that is where Incogni comes in to save the day. Remember when I finished my Titan by handwriting over 1,000 names on the banners? Yeah, you do. That video was sponsored by Incogni, and in the couple of months since then, they've sent out over 60 deletion requests, and 2/3 of them have been completed. If I'd have tried to do that manually, it would have taken me literally days of full-time work, and with a busy life, running a business and looking after toddlers and desperately trying to have a social life, I feel like that's a service well worth paying for. The setup is really easy, and the process after all that is automated on your behalf. Incogni find out who has your data, send out the deletion requests, and keep you up to date on the progress, so you can sit back and relax, safe in the knowledge your private data, name, address, phone number, purchase history, and all that other secret stuff has been purged from those data broker markets. If that sounds like something you want to get involved with, you can use the code MidwinterMinis at the link in the description to get a whopping 60% off an annual Incogni plan. 60%! How good is that? Thanks Incogni for sponsoring this video and helping me stick it to the data brokers. Now, back to painting. So, everything got prime black. Lots of light, thin coats from different angles to do the trick, but as always, if there were bits that didn't get great coverage, like the cracks and crevices, they got some thinned black paint pushed up into them. Also, what kind of idiot wears white jeans when they're painting black models? This idiot, that's who. The bases then got a quick blast with Talon sand. Don't worry, the airbrush isn't essential to any of this, I just needed to save a bit of time. After that, they got dry brushed with pale sand. A bit too pale maybe. How about a bit of thinned Agaros dunes to warm them up? Yeah, nice. The bodies on the bases got a quick coat of Guilliman flesh. Contrast paints are pretty handy for small elements you don't want to put too much effort into. And, oh yes, blood for the blood god to make the tattered remains super gory. Knock knock. Who's that at the door? Oh, just Steve with the insanely detailed, custom sculpted 3D printed parts that he made. Honestly, this guy's a genius. Not only has he made some really cool looking, more gritty, slightly animalistic heads, he's made some really awesome shoulder shields emblazoned with chaotic symbols and really unique side flip drones. Again, sporting some stylized fancy alien chaos symbols. Awesome. I got these primed up and glued on and ready for painting. Now I know that matte black things are really hard to see on camera, but don't worry, here comes some silver paint. I'm going to use the old trick of sponged on metallic paint, a dark, murky wash all over once that's dried, and then just repeating those steps a few times until we have a multi-layered, interesting looking metal colour for the armour. To block in the severed heads and skulls, I used a khaki paint and then shaded those areas with Seraphim Sepia. I also chucked a bit of that sepia wash onto the lower halves of the armour panels on most of the models too, to make them look a little bit more gritty and grimy. A little tap with your finger will help diffuse the border between the painted and unpainted areas if you're in a hurry. I don't want a really strong colour on these dudes, I want them to be dark and murky, so a base coat of Wordbearer's Red on their jumpsuits should work pretty well. And by shading with the new version of Nuln Oil, it stains a bit less and darkens the crevices a bit more. I know, it's not my first choice either. They killed the OG Nuln Oil, but you gotta use the tools you have, right? To highlight the fabric, I mixed in a bit of pale sand to the original red to desaturate and lighten it at the same time. It goes a little bit pink, but it works fine for a few sparing highlights. I put a bit of extra effort into the Farseer's cloak, but still nothing too fancy. Now speaking of the Farseer, he's the only one with skin visible, so let's paint that. Dark Prussian blue as the base coat, what a lovely colour. And again, just adding in pale sand bit by bit to create a brighter highlight colour and applying to the pronounced musculature from the top down. For the other flesh, we picked out a few highlights on the severed heads with a couple of different flesh tones just to add a bit more life to them, if you know what I mean. The bones were then highlighted with khaki mixed with pale sand too. Pale sand doing the legwork here, honestly. These minis are dark. Seriously dark, and in desperate need of contrast, so let's add a really bright pop with some white on the eye and weapon lenses, and also into the jump jet vents on the crisis suits. And then, once that's dry, a generous touch of the old Guilliman blue glaze to give them a bit of fun contrasting colour. A couple of final touches of white on the bigger lenses just to make them look like they're reflective, and the job's a good one.
Surprise! Hello, it's Hattie here. Guy had the day off today with his kids, so I stepped in to get this warband closer to the finish line. I gave the severed heads and bodies on the bases a few more glazes with thin down, fleshy contrast paints. They were looking a little bit too similar to the actual dirt colour on the bases for my liking. Then a few sparing highlights with Kislev flesh to draw the eye to them a bit more. And let's give this sad Kachchan a nice purple headband. That's better. A couple of different browns on the hair. And we definitely need some more blood effects on the necks and dripped all over the floor too. To draw the eye to the top of the model, I gave the heads and shoulders a really light dry brush with a bright silver, and then used some thin down Magos purple to add a bit of richness to the shadowed areas on the armour. Once that was dry, I gave all the models a blast with a gloss varnish. Why, you ask? Well, let me hand you over to Guy again to explain.
Right, I'm back, and it's the moment a lot of you have been waiting for. Time to get oily. For under £10, you can start messing around with oil washes for your miniatures, white spirit to thin the paint and clean your brushes, a cheap set of oil paints to experiment with, and a metal container to mix the paints. This metal palette is identical to the one I've been using for the last couple of years too, so while we're here, let's just actually see how much paint is on my palette. 34 grams for the new one, 84 for my old one. That's 50 grams of pure paint stuck to this bad boy. Anyway, back to the oil paints. When I used to do canvas painting, oil was my medium of choice, but generally, because I like to rapidly progress between stages and have stuff playable within hours, I avoid oils for tabletop minis because of the extra long drying time. Acrylic paints dry within a few minutes, but oils can take days to dry because they don't dry, really, they oxidize. However, some effects are worth the extra drying time, and white oil washes are definitely on that list. Mix white spirit into a tiny bit of the white oil paint until it's all very fluid but still opaque when you drag it out on the palette. Now when you tap it into any recesses of gloss varnished things, the whole area will just fill up thanks to capillary action. Magic. Chaotic symbols. Weapon vents. Spooky skull eyes. You want it to glow? Give it a tap. Now I left those overnight and yeah, I reckon they're dry enough to work on in the morning. I then used both a brush and an airbrush to glaze over a little bit of yellow ink, and then a tiny touch of red in some places too, just to give them that fiery, chaotic look. And once that was dry, I gave them a quick blast with matte varnish, and then added some gloss varnish again to the wet bits of the blood. And yeah, I reckon that'll do. Oh, whoops, don't forget the rims. Now, that'll do. I'm really happy with how these Dark Side Tau turned out. What do you think? Lots of experimentation here, stuff I've never done or rarely tried on minis, but I think everything turned out a-okay. Now the real question is, how should I paint up the Skitarii box that they're facing? Any ideas? Let me know in the comments. While you type out your ideas, let me quickly thank the channel's latest supporters on Patreon. Danny Clark, Laurie Alonen, Christopher Stewart, Paul Cairns, Joseph Green, Sam Dawes, Winter, Graham Wolfe, Boom Bastico, M. Nor, Louis Brooks, Shelby in a Boston Jungle, Alcom XYZ, Simon Caulfield, Vriska Circuit, Road Dog, and Martin. Now, if you fancy trying this out for yourself but can't be bothered with all the plastic melting faff that I did, those parts Steve made for me are up on his website now for a tiny fee. I think he's only charging £4 for loads of different 3D printable infantry and mech heads, shields in different sizes, and those funky upright drones too. Check out the link in the description. Now, please don't come after him, James Workshop. If anything, those heads look more like the Ingram mech from Pat Labor. Maybe Manga should go after him instead. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and FYI, I'm going to be at the UK Games Expo this coming Sunday, along with Steve and Hattie, so if you see us, come and say hi. And don't forget to check out Incogni if you fancy clawing a bit of your privacy back from those faceless conglomerates, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Chaos Tau!